how do you feel for the next 10 years when it comes to natural hydrogen? Will we have these offtakes? Will it be part of our day-to-day life, so to speak, if we can find it in these right places? And will we find it in these right places where they can connect with industry, even cities?
Again, coming back to the idea that we can control the chemistry of hydrogen formation is very, very important because it says it's everywhere. You just have to drill to the basement. And the subsurface really is reduced in a reduced state. So 10 years from now, my expectation is.
Welcome back to the Natural Hydrogen Investment Podcast, where we help you understand the ongoing investment opportunity that natural hydrogen represents. Remember that you can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. We recommend you subscribe and give us a 5-star review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. On our website, you can find the 2025 Investor Report for Natural Hydrogen. There you will find plenty of information about publicly traded and private companies, and we've given it a new look recently, so definitely a reason to check it out. Actually, I was talking about this with Morten about how we're constantly updating it now, so keep an eye on what we're doing. If you're already subscribed, then we will send it to you. You don't have to resubscribe or anything. So today's episode is very special. I need to remind viewers about something. We like to invite company directors and CEOs to the program. It's fun. It's nice to have these leaders in the space, but it's also very crucial to have government figures and scientific leaders as well. Because without them, we don't have the education. We don't have that unbiased look at the natural hydrogen industry that we need to make this space take off. Today, we have somebody who is very special and very recognized in this space, who he's going to give us plenty of information, but also we're going to get to know him a bit better. So today, we want to welcome Douglas Wicks, geohydrogen enthusiast and former program director at ARPA-E, where he developed programs related to critical minerals, geothermal, waste to energy, and of course, natural hydrogen. For the latter, this represented both the largest government investment in the space and the first competitive government funding opportunity. Douglas Wicks, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me, Anthony and Morten. Looking forward to an interesting conversation over the next minutes.
Sure. Absolutely. So it's great. I got to watch you at HNET in Paris last year, and I really love the way you spoke and the way you had an authority which everybody respected. I mean, immediately I had an idea of, wow, this person, this individual, he's very important in this space, and people, they like what he's saying, and I liked what you were saying. And to me, it's also important for us to get to know you a bit better. So I would like to ask you, just out of the gate here, what is ARPA-E? Can you tell a bit more about this government program?
ARPA-E is the Advanced Research Projects Agency of the Department of Energy. It was founded during one of the energy crises, starting under the Bush administration, initial funding under the Obama administration, with the idea of looking for transformative technologies that could impact U.S. energy independence, energy efficiency, and reduce the impact on the environment. And it's a pretty wide open space. And if you look at what ARPA-E has done, it's been in nuclear, it's been in carbon capture, steels, circuits, transmission, batteries. Just about every type of energy source, it really has been addressed by ARPA-E over the years.
Right. Okay. And when it comes to natural hydrogen, let's talk a bit more about that. Let's get a bit more into the weeds here about that. Why did ARPA-E decide to get involved in natural hydrogen? Why did it decide to support natural hydrogen?
Well, that's a really hard question. Why? I will say there was lots of skepticism around natural hydrogen and ARPA-E. A lot of pushback from ARPA-E leadership and some of my fellow program directors, as hey, if natural hydrogen was out there, we would have found it with the millions of holes we punched in the ground.
Yeah.
So it took really a number of years to get. And by the way, I was one of those skeptics in the beginning.
Oh,
When I was first approached to it by one of our fellows, Emily Yednak, who's now at Coloma, I was like, no, this isn't going to work.
hey,
Um, and she slowly convinced me, and I think her argument was something like, well, please join me on some calls. People will talk more if there's a program director on the call. And that slowly got into me, and then I would say I um, began to think about it as a chemistry problem, as a chemistry and engineering challenge. And then I was like, oh, this might take place. And um, tried to pitch the idea at ARPA-E, got a lot of pushback. I almost left ARPA-E over that, I'll say. And a good friend told me I was stupid to leave ARPA-E, that I had a great platform to talk from. So I just went out and started talking about geologic hydrogen to create the buzz. And finally ended up with it over really a period of a couple of years I did this. And finally ended up with Evelyn Wang, who joined on board. And against her better judgment, she allowed me to fund the program going forward. And to come out with really exploratory topics, focusing on what ARPA-E is good at, which is technology development. So how do we stimulate these reactions, and how do we, engineer the subsurface to control that reactions?
right. Okay. And one of the interesting things which you're talking about here is the skepticism. And this leads to a follow-up question, which I have, which is personally my own follow-up question. Why did these government, I mean, ARPA-E seems to be the only government agency or government program that has funded natural hydrogen. What is the feeling in other government programs? How do they feel about natural hydrogen or similar resources?
Um, I would say that has been a lot of skepticism in the past. There's been a lot of interest in hydrogen around the world. Almost every country has put out huge hydrogen goals, and I think the reality of green or electrolyzer hydrogen really finally came home to roost over the last year. About the fact that it's not economical. We don't have the resources to generate that much electricity, and it has serious issues. And so it's changed within the U.S. government. There is interest in geologic hydrogen going forward. Over the last year, I can say that the level of interest from my colleagues within DOE, within DOD, within the Department of Interior has significantly increased. And the same as overseas. We're slowly seeing other governments come in. I spend a lot of time with Dr. Nikki of NIDO from Japan. And he became convinced, and they've launched a natural hydrogen competitive research program in Japan, just an exploratory one to begin to understand it. We see the same in Europe, that people are coming together. We held a joint meeting last year between the US and France on geologic hydrogen. And one of the intentions was to guilt the French into spending more money in the area.
Great idea.
And, so that, I think you need to look at positive events, and then the country's competitive instincts will come in. It's going to be an area that builds up, I think, over the next couple of years.
Sorry, can I, Doc, just swoop in just to really spell it out, the difference between US and the rest of the world? how many programs did ARPA-E start up, and how much money were you handing out?
We selected 18 teams to go forward, and the total amount was just over $20 million. And that there's still additional funds to give out, but with the transition of the administration, things are slowing down a little bit.
Yeah. And this was for companies or scientists, or or something in between. I saw a hearing where Coloma said they got some money to look into stimulated geologic hydrogen, which makes me understand that it's actually money the program spent to push industry and company development forward.
Yeah, the recipients in this area, it being really a white space, we were actually quite surprised how many applications we got. And we got about 3 times as many as I expected. We went from, when we started this process, there was, 1 or 2, when I first started looking at it, there was 1 or 2 universities in the United States that thought about it. And, national labs weren't involved. And then you had Slava Zagornik drilling in Nebraska, and Coloma emerging out of stealth. And we funded companies and small, mainly small businesses. We funded national labs in this, and we funded university performers. And the intention of who we selected was to get as broad a picture as possible, such that I really don't think any one of the teams could solve the whole problem, but the level of knowledge developed by these many shots on goal will be very beneficial in the future.
I think this really, spells it out that, and this is a few years ago now, I think you started handing it out. That's $20 million into an industry where other governments around the world had spent nothing of the kind. They had put some money into important scientific work. So I'm not teasing anyone. I'm basically just saying that there's vision in the US at this point, actually going out there spending these money. So this makes the US look really good at this point, but also looking at $20 million, it looks like nothing compared to what is spent on all kinds of other energy types. So there's still room to grow, one could say, but
yeah, I mean, the $20 million was a rounding error in our green hydrogen programs.
Exactly. If we could just, I'm not asking. Normally, I'll not be asking on behalf of the industry for any government support. But if we want to move things forward, I think the industry will welcome it. I think, Douglas, I want to mention something really, important for you and for anyone working in the industry. It was very inspiring to hear when you said you were. You've been really trying to get this through to be a program in ARPA-E. You met some resistance, you kept fighting. Sometimes, when industry grows, the people you see are the ones who created companies and came out on top of it. But there's so much work needs to be done by everyone in the ecosystem, insisting that we got to move this forward. A guy like you, but also the further down the rank in the big oil companies, continuing telling their leadership, try to give this a look. So thank you very much for putting an effort into doing this. I want to move on to the next question, because talking with you, Doug, is obvious. You've been in this industry for a long time, and you probably talk with a lot of companies. Relative to how old the industry is, you've been in it for a long time, and so do I, even if I don't look like I've been anywhere for a long time, but having been in that position, Doug, what kind of you must have worked with many different players and seen the industry. How had it progressed? Have you seen some good progress during the years? Been surprised, disappointed? How have been have been going the last, let's say, two years?
I would say is the thing that amazes me is how fast interest is growing. This last, at the ARPA-E summit, we had a geologic hydrogen mixer that was put on by Renaissance Philanthropy, and the place was packed. That was so many people coming in. It was amazing, and I talked with Alexis Templeton, who was really the first person in the U.S. to talk about, looking at hydrogen as a source. And 2 years before that meeting, we could have met at a single table in a restaurant with all the people in the U.S. who were interested in it. So the growth it's a challenge for you, Morten and Anthony, to keep up with the number of startups coming out of this field. When we started, really there was Hydroma and Natural Hydrogen, Slavo's organization. We're really about that and some strange noises coming out of Russia. Now, there's a company every week almost appearing, whether it's in the services side or the resource development side. So the speed at which this is developed is really quite incredible.
Yeah. Totally. And I see that, every week, I think we get approached by a new company or a new team who want to get into the business. And of course, as in any industry, different qualities, some have brilliant ideas, some are still, cooking them maybe, but definitely it's growing. Maybe for the listeners, I'll quickly mention that Vladislav, that you're mentioning once in a while, he was, as you said, the first one to drill a real purpose natural hydrogen well in Nebraska. And he was also the author of, my understanding, we'll call it a paper, where he collected all the data of accidental discovered hydrogen. And that was a paper that I think for many, at least for me, kind of got this, whoa, there's really something out there. And for some time, we repurposed his map on our website to show people that this is actually something that has been found, to counter that it doesn't exist, message that we often got in the beginning of this industry.
Yes.
But Doug, when we first met in real life, because when I first saw you, that was actually a YouTube video buried somewhere where you and Emily were discussing something, and I think she had a cat in there as well. It was just, I loved it. It was probably my second information I got on natural hydrogen. But things quickly evolved from that, and we met in Calgary a few years ago, a freezing 40 degrees Calgary experience. I've never been there before.
Negative.
Negative. Yeah. This was so, and even Scandinavian. This was really cold. So we had good reason to stay inside and talk. And you said, I think with a great sense of urgency that I like when we discuss new energies, and we got to remember that we are a bit behind on finding new energies. And you said something, as I remember, that just natural or geologic hydrogen will not cut it. We need to be able to stimulate so that we can produce even more of it, which got me thinking that this, and since I understand since that you're looking quite a lot into this, stimulation of geologic hydrogen. How have things developed on this? Personally, I was surprised hearing Alex Templeton speaking at a London conference a few weeks ago, that for how I was informed, at least, this has evolved quickly that I anticipated. But I'm not sure you were surprised in the same way, having been closer to the program. But could you just give us, your thinking on the stimulated geologic hydrogen?
Yeah, the stimulation, it really comes back to, economics. I think we're going to find natural deposits. We're going to find Moly type of deposits. And you look at Moly, 20 kilograms a day, it powers a nice little fuel cell. It's not going to pay for infrastructure. And one thing I want to emphasize, I talk about stimulation in the broadest sense. There's the stimulation the Europeans are afraid of, aka fracking, which is going to play a role under a different name. In there's chemical stimulation, catalysis. This is a chemical reaction that happens in a room, or happens in real time. It could be thermal and pressure changes to stimulate it. I mean, we have companies out there talking about, heating up rocks to generate hydrogen faster, spinouts from Shell to do that. Um, and, and then again, with a chemical reaction, I try to impress upon people that it's not an irreversible reaction. It actually goes back and forth. So stimulation might just be pulling the hydrogen out of the system at depth to drive it. Because really to get to commercial scale, we need to have 30 to 100,000 tons of hydrogen production a year, and not from a well, but from a development site. And that's on scale with natural gas. And if we're going to be economical, and the economics are really driven by production from a discovery. And so finding out how to stimulate that, whether it's finding an existing deposit accumulation, drilling down to the source rock and tickling the source rock to make it fill faster, is something we're going to have to do.
And I think, that's a big subject among everybody, among the company owners, among the founders, the investors, and the skeptics also, of course, that we are not there at the commercial level yet. I think that is the biggest weakness we've had. We've had the Mali well, which is a sign, more than a sign maybe, but it's only there to show that it can be done. I think the problem has been that we haven't been able to find similar conditions or exploit and extract this amount of hydrogen before.
Not publicly, at least.
Not publicly. That's the interesting part, and sadly, we haven't been able to find anything insider information on our side, at least on my side.
Hopefully, we could break that news at some point. That'll be great. Breaking news.
That would be a great exclusive.
Our podcast, but yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Anthony, continue.
No, don't worry. And honestly, this is the question I must bring now to the table. Knowing that we only have the Mali example for now, and proving commerciality is so essential. As somebody who is so familiar with the space and so familiar with what goes on, how far do you think we are from finding that commercial well that we can say, hey, this is the breakthrough? I'm not asking for a solid prediction, just thoughts here.
Well, part of me thinks that if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. I wouldn't be on the podcast.
I respect that.
I would be out reserving drill heads. The crucial thing that has to happen is getting drills into the ground. We need to test out these theories. We, have a number of companies now doing this, some in total stealth mode, some behind a curtain. We have Coloma is not going to tell you the results of their wells. Some are being very open about it. I mean, Hytera talks very openly about their work, as does, Gold Hydrogen. The Australians, due to their stock listing, have to be relatively transparent. And I think we're going to need to be in a system where we have several hundred wells drilled, to really begin to understand the resource and the likes. We also need the teams looking at the fundamental science of stimulation to come back and really tell us what are the greatest rocks to stimulate. And the advancements in just the last year of the ARPA-E projects, the understanding. I mean, I cannot, overstate how much we've learned. And I am very surprised, which is good,
No,
I am
that's
continually surprised that different rocks give different results. Rocks that I would have thought would never have worked are going to turn out to be really prime ones. The catalysis conditions or the reaction conditions in the subsurface are really dictated by the rock, where you have certain systems being completely opposite of conventional knowledge. A lot of our understanding is developed around Oman with the very great work that Alexis Templeton has done, and the other groups, and Zagagnik was involved in that, and of really tracing the reaction through the rock. It turns out that's not the only way, and I'll leave it at that to say that there's some exciting stuff that's developing that's coming forward. So, coming back to your original question, given all that, I'd say in the next 5 years, we're going to find something big.
okay.
My assumption is Coloma must have something big. And they have some very aggressive investors who are like wondering what's going on, or I don't think the investors are wondering what's going on. It make me wonder what's going on when I see who's investing in them and their ability to raise additional funds. That they have something, but they're very quiet, and I would be too. I mean, if I had that much money in my pocket, and the ability to drill 100 wells, I'd be very quiet.
And I have to interrupt because I know Morten is about to say something, and I
He's
know
about to blow up.
yeah, I can see it. But I just have to say something quickly. I was talking with somebody the other day, and they were disagreeing very strongly about what they feel about how I'm so bullish about natural hydrogen. And they say, no, that's not possible. It's not going to happen, and so on. And all I could answer with was, well, $1 billion disagrees with you. All of this investment, it's coming from somewhere. It's coming for a reason, and it's not just a calculated risk. I see it as a bit more than that. So I think we have something. We just don't have it public yet. But that's my opinion.
In 5 years, I'd say we'll have something commercially significant, which means we have flow information, we have an offtake on site. To do this, are we going to have the field that's producing 30,000 to 100,000 tons of hydrogen? No, but
I think
we'll have that one that will tickle all those who want to be fast followers to jump in.
Okay, thank you for that.
I think, and you're right, Anthony and Doug, of course, this is one of my favorite subjects, and we don't know, and to the audience listening, that we normally track focuses on publicly traded companies, and Doug, you mentioned Gold Hydrogen and Hytera. They have to tell what they're doing because they are publicly traded. Coloma doesn't have to tell anything, but it is known that they raised more money than the rest of the industry combined. So they have sufficient capital to go do interesting stuff. And because we don't know, if they have something that they like in their wells in the US, they have a lot of time and money to take more of the right kind of acreage and do their thing. One could speculate that a few years ago, I think they raised 90 million, and then it seems went out, drilled some wells, and then they raised 250 million. And you could argue that investors are just that stupid, that they drilled all negative wells and found nothing. And if that was the case, I would think then investors in such an early industry would say then the 90 million would have been enough. But they gave them 250. But again, really high on speculation
and by
here.
the way,
that's just
more since then.
And more since then, branching out to Australia. Coloma Australia is actually licensing Coloma technology. So, yeah.
I was looking at, just to interrupt you again, Morten, I was looking at the valuation of Coloma, last valuation, which was public, which was in October 2024, $1.2 billion. And I was thinking, well, of course, you might see an AI company get that and not be doing much, but this is different. This is resources and similar to oil and gas. I mean, this is not going just to taking a calculated risk, as I said before. Maybe I'm repeating myself, but as something they must be there. I mean, they're showing something that must be, just like in software, you might have an MVP or something, which is some customers. Here, there must be something there for so much money to be going into this. So, I mean, maybe I'm just an optimist, but
we should invite them to the podcast. We know that they aren't telling much, but they are telling more than they did a few years ago. So maybe, the time we get ready, something good could come out of it.
I think they went up and now they're back down to telling you nothing. I joke with them to say, obviously somebody's super glued your lips shut.
Yeah, exactly. You try when you meet them in Paris at HNet and stuff to give them a lot of beers and champagne, but they're still just glued. They're really good at it. So I respect it a lot. You kind of touched on it already, Doug, but just want to make totally clear that my next question would be, what kind of milestones do you think, we'll need to reach in the time ahead to get where we really want to be? I'm guessing from what you just said that drilling more wells could be one of them, but maybe you could elaborate a bit of what is the next thing we want to see as an industry. Maybe technology, maybe just doing stuff.
Yeah, part of it, it's drilling more wells. I mean, that's what gets me excited is what was brought up last year in I think it was the HNet conference or associated with it, of rotary truth detectors. It is actually going out and putting a drill in the ground to find hydrogen, and people are doing that, and they're finding hydrogen. And so I think the next hurdle we need to keep the investments going is somebody to come out and report flow rates above 15 kilograms per day. That somebody's coming out with that, and we'll see with Hytera drilling in Kansas, and people drilling in Montana, and people drilling in Iowa, and people drilling all over the place. That's going to be a key milestone, that somebody comes out and says, we have flow, we monitored it for X amount of time, and it's not a small gas pocket. That we have some indication of a source of reasonable size, and continues. The next milestone we really need, and this is kind of an interface of drilling and the laboratory work and modeling, is someone to come up with a auditable method of resource and reserve characterization. And I view where we are now in two different ways. One where we have the Drake well syndrome, where Drake was running around drilling holes all over Pennsylvania. Nobody talks about the dry holes he drilled before he found one. He had a lot, and his investors were very impatient. I think I really credit BBC for pulling that fact up. I mean, that's something I knew. And then the other analogy is tight gas, that we have in the United States. That when it was first exploited, the idea of fracking, for enhanced production, no one believed it. Because they came back and said, "Oh, you just cracked into a small thing," and they went along and produced a lot of natural gas and continued to frack, and the developments were there. And wasn't until the geophysics caught up with the drilling experience to say, if your drill sees this, and the geology is X, and then the geophysics tells you this tells you what the resource is. And with that number, you can go get an investment. I mean, as of today, if Hytera had hit a gusher in Kansas, which they would have had to disclose, that was putting out, tons of hydrogen per day. And they wanted to develop it and go off and run off to a bank to finance the upside. They'd look at them and go, "Do you have 10 years of production?" And they'd be like, "I don't know." And so the only money would really be, very costly venture money. And it's the same thing in big companies. I mean, it's the same thing in Exxon. Nobody in Exxon is going to release funds to develop a field or start new projects until somebody comes up with a really good resource and reserve calculation. And with hydrogen, it's very different because stimulation is going to be an impact. So the hydrogen might not be there, but we're going to make it. And how do you look at systems that you're replenishing your resource? I think GTEC and Snowfox and some of the other companies that are talking about this are making progress. But I don't think there is a bankable assessment. And by the way, we can't get that bankable investment until we have the first flow. So we're in that chicken and the egg situation now.
I think you're touching on something really interesting there, Doug. This like comparing it with to tight gas, the shale revolution, and I spoke with some big oil company guys saying that, like you just said, we didn't believe that it could work. Shale gas, it was just a waste of money. We didn't touch it, and someone made it work. And I think sometimes that could be a good explanation of why big oil aren't doing this already. That's the question I get sometimes, saying, if this really works, why don't Exxon and BP do this already? Maybe they do. Maybe they're just much in stealth mode. We don't know. But I think it takes someone.
They know a lot. They know a lot. So I would say they want to be first to be second. And so they're going to let somebody de-risk it. I have talked with geologists and reservoir engineers at most of the major companies, and they know the rocks, they know the systems, and they're just waiting for it to come clear to say what is the best play type going to be for the production of hydrogen.
Yeah, I think history will tell you that what will for them be a small investment to take over something that works or to start doing it could be a big a big exit for some of the earlier guys working this industry. But that's just me thinking as an investor. I actually want to bridge a bit into to you, Doug, saying that hearing now how much you've spent doing natural hydrogen and how much you know this. When I wondered what makes you tick. Is this fun because it's new science, or because it's tough to get through ARPA-E, or is it great to find new energy sources? What and why this part of the you could work big oil, I guess you could be doing other stuff. Why this area? What have you been
the challenge I think is good. And the potential return is unbelievable. I mean, if we're correct, there's a lot of ifs and a lot of stuff needs to be answered. But if we're correct and we can stimulate the oxidation of subsurface minerals to generate hydrogen, the potential is measured in the quadrillions of tons. 1 billion tons would run the United States for a full year, everything. And this is, if we figure it out, it's a resource we know how to develop. We have, especially in the United States, we have lots of people who know how to drill holes, put things down holes, and take gas out of holes. In the U.S. of all countries is the best position to do this. We have the workforce, we have the technology, we have the companies to do this. And, the thing that many people don't, they're like, oh, drilling's too expensive and this and the like. You might have to go to, to several thousand meters to get to the stuff. I don't think people really understand how advanced drilling has become. The numbers that I've heard is an 80% improvement in cost over the last 10 years. The efficiency of these groups, everybody looks at drill counts in the United States and saying they're going down, this is horrible. No, the drills are just much more efficient. So they do that. There was a great discussion with Tim Latimer about Fervo. Fervo is an enhanced geothermal system. And their most recent well that they did out in the western United States, they shocked themselves at how fast they could drill and how much that just drove down the cost. Yeah. And it's going to be a similar thing with geologic hydrogen. You might have to go down several thousand meters and then go horizontally out 10 kilometers, which is not unheard of today. And you can put in multiple wells and once you find a field, you really just sit down and you have one drill platform and you just drill, go out, drill, go out. It'd be very heavily managed.
I guess also this is also a unique U.S. skill. I guess the cost of drilling in U.S. is so much lower than the rest of the world. At least looking at Europe, where we don't have much onshore drill rigs left because oil and gas is banned onshore. So this makes me sometimes expect that we will see most activity in the U.S. maybe the first half commercial thing, discovery. Do you think the same? Is it so much cheaper that it skews things towards U.S. for the first discoveries, or what do you think?
I think it's going to skew it towards the U.S. Or the Middle East, Australia. Asia is ripe for it. China is getting very aggressive in the space and doing research. And when they start something, they go into it all in. I don't think they have the technology the U.S. has. And that's the other thing to keep in mind when we talk about commercial success is this is one of the few technologies where the deployment technology is fully commercial. We just have to tell people where to drill, what to put down the hole, and how to take the gas out of the hole. Once we answer those relatively simple questions, it's going to move very, very fast. If I compare it to the challenges like fusion faces for another novel energy source, the number of things that have to, repetitively work at 5 nines efficiency is astronomical. I mean, the complexity and the ability to fail. With drilling, I think we're there.
Yeah.
We don't need breakthroughs.
We're leveraging existing skills of an industry and a workforce and technologies. I agree. Mm-hmm. I should have you speak to my investors once in a while, Doug. That will be, you're saying what I want to say as well. So maybe hearing it from someone else would be good. I'll reach out to you on that one. But okay. I want to, we're running out of time.
By the way, I'm no longer a public servant, so I do charge for my time.
But that's exactly my point. As we're looking at the time here, I wanted to ask you because when I heard that your time at ARPA-E was ending, I was sad, fearing that we will lose one of the guys really supporting natural hydrogen. So, but it seems you're still very much on top of it. And so, what are you planning the next steps? Will they include natural hydrogen? I know you're very much into critical minerals.
Could you? I have two very hot topics pulling on me at the same time.
Good.
So I can keep busy. I will be staying in the natural hydrogen space. And that there's some opportunities in the future that I cannot talk about that I might have a really large impact on it. Or it's, I'm working with, select natural hydrogen companies now, to go forward with, that, really to look in and help them with their thinking. And trying to do something in such a way that, I don't run into conflict of interest issues too much. But they say I'm going to stay in both the critical mineral and geologic hydrogen space. The subsurface is so important, for the economy and our standard of living. We have to really have advocates to say, let's responsibly develop the subsurface better.
Totally agree. Yeah. Good
Yeah.
point.
And it sounds like in this stage of your career, you're living pretty much underground, right? That's how it sounds to me, with the critical minerals, natural hydrogen, and other subsurface endeavors. I think it's a big part of what you're doing. And before we go, and I want to thank you once more for being here, and also not just for being here, but for providing such a bullish view on natural hydrogen, because it doesn't seem like it's we have the same conflict of interest. For example, with a CEO, he will obviously have to say, well, natural hydrogen is going to take off. With you, it feels great because it feels more natural and more from the scientific point of view. And staying in the scientific point of view, Douglas, let's get a prediction. But now it's not just about when it's going to happen. How do you feel for the next 10 years when it comes to natural hydrogen? Will we have these off takes? Will it be part of our day-to-day life, so to speak, if we can find it in these right places? And will we find it in these right places where they can connect with industry, even cities, so to speak, powering with energy and decarbonizing the industry in cities?
Now, again, coming back to the idea that we can control the chemistry of hydrogen formation is very, very important, because it says it's everywhere. You just have to drill to the basement. And iron, the primary one for this, or one of the major sources, is one of the top elements. Reduced iron is one of the top elements in the earth. The subsurface really is reduced, in a reduced state. So 10 years from now, my expectation is we will have a field, at that size of at least 30,000 tons per year. And, which is going to give us the indication that we can start cookie cutting it, to come around like we do now with oil and gas. And, where it falls in the energy mix, that's to be seen. And it really comes down to price. And, if we can really nail that $1 a kilogram price that everybody talks about at the wellhead, you're on an energy basis competitive with natural gas around the world. And I think the ability to produce it anywhere is going to be very important, because the real challenge with hydrogen is moving it, storing it. But if you're just going to bring it up and feed it into a turbine and spin electrons, that's one thing. Same thing with a steel mill, same thing with a biofuel site. If you don't store it and create it on demand, it's a very different way of thinking about it.
Well, you heard it from the man himself. Thank you so much for being on the Natural Hydrogen Investment Podcast, Douglas. And we hope we continue speaking with you in the future. We hope to have you back one day when we're making that big announcement, right, Morten?
Exactly. Yeah, we'll bring you in, to help announce the 30,000 tons a year project.
To break this news, break the news, and
break
to make it.
News. Somebody can do it.
Yeah,
somebody can do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually, one of the interesting things, I forgot to introduce ourselves, Morten. We didn't say our names. We didn't say who we are. Again, I'm Anthony Muhi, hydrogen enthusiast and chemical engineer.
And I'm Morten, specialized investor and founder of Natural Hydrogen Ventures.
Thanks again for watching our program. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, as you know. Subscribe on each of these or one of these, doesn't matter. Leave us a 5-star review if you're on Apple, please, or on Spotify. And you can download our 2025 investor report on our website, nat-h2investing.com. That's nat-h2investing.com. We will have a very interesting guest in the next few weeks and next few months. So stay tuned. And as always, thank you. And see you, Douglas, and see you, Maud.
See you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.